Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never wanted a war, I just wanted peace. But when a clipboard-wielding HOA queen tried to claim my land with fake smiles and silent threats, she picked the wrong neighbor. What started with a fence turned into a battle for freedom, and I don't lose fights on my own damn lawn. I never thought being a good neighbor would become my biggest liability. When I bought the house near the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, it felt like a reward. One story, stone and timber, quiet as a Sunday morning, with tall pines casting long shadows across my porch. No mortgage. Bought it outright with my firefighter pension and the last few years of scrimping. My name's Zach Everett, 37, ex-firefighter from Colorado Springs, and I just wanted peace. No sirens, no screaming, no adrenaline. Just the sound of wind rustling through pine needles and the occasional rabbit stealing from my garden. The neighborhood itself wasn't exactly suburban hell, but it had that neatness. Cookie-cutter homes in muted tones, lawns like golf courses, neighbors who waved politely and whispered from behind blinds. I figured I could keep to myself, but still be decent. I helped an older couple dig out their sidewalk after a snowstorm, cleared leaves from a clogged drainage channel with some high schoolers once, even donated to the local middle school when they needed money for new band uniforms. Just neighborly stuff. No agenda. That's probably how I got on Karen Ashton's radar. She came to my door on a breezy Saturday morning in May. She had that power bob haircut, pastel blazer, and a clipboard. The holy trinity of suburban dominance. Zach, good morning. I'm Karen, president of the Silver Pines Ridge HOA. She said it like I should applaud. We don't formally govern your property, of course, but I wanted to ask something minor. I should have known better right then. She pointed to my fence, a perfectly functional cedar slat fence I'd stained myself. It's just about a foot out of alignment with the street symmetry. We're trying to create a more unified curb appeal along the block. Do you think you could shift it inward just a foot? I blinked. Why? Visual harmony, cohesion. It helps property values, she said, as if she were reading from a pamphlet. I should have told her to pound sand, but I didn't. I'd just finished installing it a month earlier, but whatever. If a foot kept the peace, fine. I spent that Sunday dismantling and rebuilding the front line of fence. Took me 10 hours. My reward was a dry thank you note dropped in my mailbox. Handwritten, sure, but unsigned. 2 weeks later, she was back. This time, she stood beside a man I didn't recognize, clipboard in her hand again. Just a tiny suggestion, your mailbox. The standard for the HOA is faux stone with black iron lettering. Yours is a bit rustic. Rustic was polite. Mine was metal, battered from snowplows and years of disuse. But it worked. Still, I went down to Lowe's, spent $120 and swapped it out. Then came the paint. Late June, I got a formal letter, real letterhead and all, suggesting I repaint my house to better reflect the Silver Pines aesthetic and avoid visual dissonance. I laughed when I read it. My house was earthy brown with green trim, matched the trees. Apparently that was too bold. I didn't want to fight, not yet, so I caved again. Neutral gray, just like the others. Dull, flavorless, uniform. The whole time I painted, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A couple neighbors waved, but mostly I got stiff nods. Then one night, I heard Karen on her phone outside, walking past my house. Her voice carried. He's compliant. Sweet guy. No resistance yet. I think we can loop him in officially by fall. Loop me in. That night, I started digging. Looked up the HOA boundary maps online. My property sat just outside it. Not even a question. I wasn't listed on their member rolls. I had no covenant, no obligation, no dues. Yet somehow, I'd spent money and hours fixing things they had no right to control. I hadn't signed a single document, and it was all starting to smell like bait. The next morning, I walked outside and looked at my freshly painted gray walls, my stone mailbox, and the foot of space I'd surrendered from my yard. I was starting to feel like a damn volunteer in someone else's army. And I didn't even like the general. It was a Thursday when things took a turn from strange to downright presumptuous. The kind of day where the heat soaks through your shirt before 10 and the flies are already aggressive. I'd just finished watering the tomatoes when I heard a knock at the door. Not a gentle one either. The kind you hear from someone who thinks the house is already halfway theirs. I opened it to see Karen standing there again, only this time she wasn't alone. Two other board members from the HOA stood behind her, a tall guy in golf gear and a short woman with a smug expression and sunglasses that didn't quite cover her scowl. They were all smiling, but it was the kind of smile a dentist gives before drilling. "Zach," Karen beamed. "We're so glad you're home. We have wonderful news." I didn't say anything. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited. "We've selected your lawn to host this year's Silver Pines Ridge annual neighborhood BBQ," she said, like I'd just won a car on a game show. "It's really the perfect space. Plenty of shade, central location, great ambiance. It'll be this Saturday. We'll bring the grills and tents. Just need you to have the gate open by 10. I blinked, thought maybe I'd misheard. "Sorry, you're what?" The woman with the sunglasses spoke this time. "We voted unanimously. It's a community decision." I crossed my arms. "You want to hold your HOA event on my property?" Karen laughed lightly, like I was being silly. "Oh, Zach, don't be so dramatic. You've been such a wonderful neighbor. This just makes sense. You're practically part of us already." "I'm not part of the HOA," I said flatly. Her smile tightened. "But your property is part of the community." "Legally, it isn't." The man in the polo shirt finally chimed in. "It's just a barbecue, man. Don't be antisocial." Something shifted in me right then. Maybe it was the tone. Like I was being unreasonable for not wanting strangers in my yard. Maybe it was all the silent compliance finally catching up to me. But I stood a little straighter. "I'm not hosting anything," I said. "This is private land. You don't get to schedule events here. That's not how this works." Karen's eyes narrowed just a little. "After everything we've done to help you integrate, the mailbox, the paint, we offered our guidance." "Didn't ask for it." Her smile dropped completely. "Well, this is disappointing. Very disappointing. It's not a good look, Zach. People notice this sort of attitude." She turned to leave, motioning to her silent entourage. "We'll see you around." They walked off, murmuring amongst themselves. I watched them go, heart pounding harder than it should have. Was this how it worked? A fake friendliness until you say no. Then the mask drops, and the real HOA comes out? Later that day, I found a folded flyer in my mailbox, printed on glossy paper titled, "Is Your Neighbor Supporting Our Community Spirit?" No names were used, of course, but it mentioned someone who has benefited from the community's generosity, yet refuses to participate. That night, someone spray-painted "Traitor to Community" in red across the edge of my driveway. Not my garage. Just subtle enough to make them feel clever. Not subtle enough for me to miss the message. I spent an hour scrubbing it off. Then I sat on the porch with a beer, staring out at my perfectly manicured HOA-friendly lawn. I'd gone along with their suggestions to keep the peace. They mistook that for surrender. They'd made a serious mistake. I should have known it wouldn't end with the spray paint. The morning after the HOA's attempted invasion of my lawn, I went outside and found my trash bins gone. Just gone. Not tipped over or misplaced. Vanished like they'd been abducted. I checked with my neighbors on both sides. No one had seen anything. I walked up and down the street. Nothing. The city said no crews were in the area. I filed a report just in case, but I already had a pretty good idea who was responsible. They didn't even have to wear masks. The cowardice was loud enough without them. I replaced the bins. A minor nuisance, I thought. Maybe that would be the end of it. It wasn't. That Friday evening, I came home from running errands to find both porch lights smashed. Shards of glass glittered on the welcome mat. Nothing stolen, nothing touched inside, just those two lights. Clean breaks, precision vandalism. I swept it up in silence, jaw tight, eyes scanning the quiet street. No one saw anything, of course. By Monday, my front path looked like a damn crime scene. Someone had poured a sticky mixture, flour, glue, and what smelled like old beer, right across the walkway from my gate to the front steps. It dried into a pale, crusty mess, thick enough to pull at your boots. Took me 2 hours and a power washer to clear it. That's when I started looking into security cameras. Enough was enough. I installed a modest system, 4 motion-activated cameras with night vision, all feeding into cloud storage. One covered the front porch and walkway, another the driveway, and 2 facing the yard and perimeter. I angled them discreetly. I wasn't trying to make a statement, just trying to catch whoever thought they owned me. Less than 48 hours later, I got my first payoff. 3 figures crept up my driveway just past 2 in the morning. The infrared feed caught them clearly. Karen and the same 2 board members from the BBQ incident. They weren't subtle. Karen carried what looked like a garbage bag. The man had a spray can. They dumped trash over my gate, then approached my garage wall and started tagging it in black paint. Community freeloader. They giggled. Karen actually laughed. The whole thing lasted maybe 5 minutes. They left the bag right in my flower bed. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat watching the footage over and over, wondering what kind of person wakes up in the middle of the night, drives to their neighbor's house, and commits petty crimes like it's a high school prank. Grown adults, civic leaders, HOA royalty. The next morning, I printed stills from the video. I stored the full clip in 3 places: cloud, flash drive, and a separate hard copy I tucked in my gun safe. Then I called the police. Officer Green showed up around 9. Mid-30s, practical haircut, looked like he'd seen plenty of suburban drama, and had stopped being impressed a long time ago. I showed him the footage, offered coffee. He took it black. "Well," he said, "that's some clear footage." "Thought so," I replied. He took a statement and told me they'd be opening an investigation. I asked how serious the charges could be. "Depends," he said. "Vandalism, trespassing, criminal mischief, at minimum. If it turns out they coordinated through the HOA, might be civil implications too, maybe more." I filed a report and forwarded everything to my lawyer. I'd retained one a few weeks earlier when I first smelled the rot. I emailed him the footage along with a timeline of events, the mailbox, the paint job, the unsolicited HOA advice, and now this. Later that evening, I got a knock on the door. A neighbor, Brian, the guy across the street, was standing awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said, "look, I know there's been some weird stuff going on." I raised an eyebrow. "Weird stuff?" He scratched the back of his neck. "I just wanted to say, I didn't vote for them, Karen and her little club. I don't go to the meetings. Most of us don't, honestly. We just let her run things." I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat. "You're a good guy. You've helped people. Just thought you should know not everyone's with them." I nodded. "Appreciate it." That night, I installed another camera, pointed directly at the sidewalk. Let them come. A week passed without incident. That alone made me suspicious. No new trash bags, no paint, no smashed lights. It was like the HOA had gone into hibernation. I stayed sharp. Cameras rolling, porch light on all night, floodlight wired to motion sensors. But every time I checked the feed, nothing. Then came the envelope. It was hand-delivered, not by mail, but by some smug 20-something intern in khakis who looked like he'd just left a state fair HOA booth. I was standing in my driveway checking the tires on my truck when he approached, handed me the manila folder, and left without a word. Inside, a typed letter on HOA letterhead. Big font, bold words, formal threats. The letter claimed I was in violation of multiple community compliance standards, citing specific articles from the HOA bylaws, Articles 4.3, 5.7, and 9.1. It accused me of willful non-participation in community enrichment events, aesthetic inconsistency in fence alignment, and obstruction of community access traditions. At the bottom, it declared I owed a fine of $3,000 to be paid within 30 days to avoid escalated enforcement procedures. The letter was signed by Karen Ashton, president, with a fake wax seal, like this was Game of Thrones. I stared at it for a full minute, then laughed out loud. Not a dry chuckle, a full-bodied, bitter laugh that echoed off the pines. I wasn't laughing because it was funny. I was laughing because it was so goddamn audacious. My lawyer, Daniel Grossman, a no-nonsense litigator out of Pueblo, nearly dropped his coffee when I showed him the document over Zoom. "Zach," he said after scanning the scanned copy, "this is pure fiction. You're not a member of the HOA. They have zero standing, zero jurisdiction. This isn't even a demand letter. It's a prop, something from a bad high school mock trial." I nodded. "So what do I do?" He leaned forward. "Yeah, we hit back. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff for harassment and property damage, citing the video footage, the paint, the trash, and now, extortion. Daniel drafted a cease and desist letter and had it served to Karen directly, certified mail and all, but I wasn't done. I drove down to the county records office myself, walked up to the zoning clerk, a tired-looking guy named Al who smelled like cold coffee and knew everything about land boundaries. Told him I needed a certified plat map of Silver Pines Ridge and the surrounding parcels. 10 minutes later, I had it in my hand. It couldn't have been clearer. The eastern edge of the HOA boundary ended 47 feet before my driveway. My parcel 113-B had never been, and legally could not be, part of the HOA without my voluntary written consent and a 2/3 vote from existing members. No such vote had ever happened. I scanned the document, sent it to Daniel, printed 3 copies. One went into my safe, one on the fridge, one I framed and hung in my living room. Let Karen come see it, but she didn't show. Instead, that week, the HOA started sending letters to my neighbors, thinly veiled insinuations. Have you experienced non-cooperation from nearby property owners? And support our community against disruptive elements. One woman, Sheila, 2 doors down, texted me a photo of her letter with the caption, WTF. You okay? It was starting to feel like a siege, but I wasn't the one under pressure anymore. Daniel filed a preliminary motion for civil damages, listing attempted extortion, harassment, and reputational harm. He forwarded all footage and documents to the district attorney's office with a recommendation for criminal investigation into HOA board overreach and false representation. Meanwhile, I upgraded my camera system. Double redundancy. Live alerts to my phone. I even stuck a decoy camera with a blinking red light right above the garage. Bait. Let them try something now. I wasn't just defending anymore. I was preparing to make this war public. It was quiet again. Too quiet. After the cease and desist went out, after the complaint to the sheriff and the motion for civil action hit their inbox, the entire HOA went radio silent. No letters, no flyers, no midnight vandalism. It was like they hit the brakes so hard the tires melted, which made it obvious something bigger was happening behind the scenes. 3 days after Daniel submitted our complaint to the district attorney's office, I got a call from Detective Maura Hall. Stern voice, clipped sentences. She asked to schedule a formal interview, not just to talk about vandalism, but to go over everything related to the HOA's actions, not just toward me. They've got a history, she said. We've had 2 other complaints in the past year, unfiled, unpursued, but your documentation is detailed. Damn right it was. I met her the next morning at the sheriff's station. Brought everything, the flash drives, printouts, certified maps, copies of HOA letters, stills from the surveillance videos, and even my weathered notebook with handwritten notes of dates, times, suspicious incidents. She asked questions I hadn't expected. Did you ever sign anything, Zach? Anything, even a neighbor agreement, block covenant, easement language. No. Ever verbally agree to join HOA functions? No. Did they ever give you any materials, brochures, welcome packets, onboarding? No. She smiled faintly. You're about to be their worst nightmare. Turns out, the sheriff's office had already pulled HOA filings from the county archives, including their charter, their mapped boundary filings, their minutes from meetings. I wasn't on anything. Not in the territory, not on the registry, not in the vote logs. My property was a ghost zone to them, or should have been, until they tried to claim it. Maura told me they had probable cause to initiate a search warrant of the HOA office, a small converted guest room in Karen Ashton's house. They executed the warrant 2 days later. I got a call at 7 a.m. from Daniel. They found something, he said. You're going to want to hear this. Inside Karen's home, HOA headquarters, they found 3 different versions of the Silver Pines Ridge HOA boundary map, all digitally altered. One of them included my parcel. Poorly, too. The lot outline was copy-pasted and slightly off-scale. Printed copies of internal emails. One from Karen to the 2 other board members read, "He's malleable. We can push him until he folds. Start with surface-level suggestions, then ramp up." Budget spreadsheets with entries marked incident management and community compliance response. Next to those were reimbursements for paint, materials, and after-hours expenses. It wasn't just a petty feud anymore. This was conspiracy, document forgery, and misuse of funds, all wrapped in HOA letterhead. By the time the search was done, the DA had enough to file charges against Karen Ashton for criminal mischief for orchestrating the vandalism, attempted extortion, forgery of legal documents, abuse of organizational power, and, most poetic of all, trespassing. Her 2 sidekicks, the man with the spray can and the sunglasses woman from the BBQ stunt, were named as co-conspirators. When they came to arrest Karen, she tried to spin it. I heard through the grapevine that she told the officers I was an infiltrator trying to sabotage the community. She even cried when they cuffed her. didn't stop them. The local news picked it up by the afternoon. The headline was almost surreal. Silver Pines Ridge HOA president arrested in extortion plot against local homeowner. That homeowner was me. I watched the segment from my living room, feet up on the table, a fresh beer in hand. The anchor kept a neutral tone, but you could tell she was barely keeping her eyebrows in check. The best part? The footage of Karen being led out of her home in a hoodie and slippers, flanked by 2 deputies. Her lawn was perfectly trimmed. Her expression? Not so much. By evening, my inbox was full. Neighbors I hadn't heard from in months sent messages of support. Some apologized. One woman, the same Sheila who texted me about the weird HOA letter, wrote, "We were scared of her. Thank you for not backing down." I didn't respond to most of them, not out of bitterness. I was just busy preparing for what came next, because this wasn't over, not until the whole damn system came down with her. I walked into the courtroom wearing the same boots I used to wear in the firehouse, scuffed, solid, dependable. My lawyer told me to dress respectable but relatable, and I figured those boots told the truth better than any polished loafers ever could. I wasn't here for show. I was here for war. It wasn't a criminal trial. That would come later. This was my civil suit, my day in court, filed under Everett v. Silver Pines Ridge HOA et al. I was suing for damages, vandalism, emotional distress, attempted extortion, defamation, and unlawful targeting by an organization that had no legal jurisdiction over me. Karen sat across the aisle, flanked by her 2 cronies wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my fence. Her smile was frozen in place, a look halfway between denial and desperation. Her lawyer, some silver-haired guy from Albuquerque, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Ruth Delgado, began by establishing the facts. I was not a member of the HOA. My parcel was legally distinct. There had been no covenant, no vote, no opt-in, period. Then came the video footage. I'd seen it a dozen times by now, but watching it on the courtroom screen, Karen dumping trash in my yard at 2:13 a.m., spray can in hand, laughing, it felt different, public, naked, powerful. Then came the emails. Daniel projected each one, walking the judge through internal communications, discussions about non-compliant neighbors, a budget labeled compliance enforcement, phrases like pressure him gradually, and he won't fight back if we're strategic. Karen didn't even look up. My lawyer called Detective Hall to testify. She spoke with calm, crisp authority, laying out the results of the HOA headquarters search, falsified maps, duplicate records, multiple versions of meeting minutes. Even the printer log showed edits where my property had been illegally added to a forged jurisdiction map. When the judge asked Karen's lawyer for comment, he stammered something about interpretive enforcement boundaries. Judge Delgado raised an eyebrow so high I thought it might detach from her skull. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Karen's pen nervously tapping her notepad. Then it was my turn. Daniel asked me a few basic questions. I kept it simple, clear. I talked about the fence, the mailbox, the house paint, the moment they demanded to use my yard for their party, like it was owed to them, the spray paint on my garage, the messages, the silence from the community, the breaking point. When I finished, the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Everett," she said, "what in your opinion was the goal of these actions?" I paused. Then I said, "Control." They couldn't make me join them, so they tried to break me instead. The judge nodded. Deliberation took less than an hour. When she returned, Judge Delgado laid it out in a tone colder than a Colorado creek in spring. The court finds the HOA and its board acted far outside their authority, engaging in targeted harassment, document falsification, and malicious property damage. This behavior constitutes not only civil liability, but presents clear evidence for criminal prosecution. She looked straight at Karen. The plaintiff is awarded $850,000 in compensatory and punitive damages. Further, this court recommends a full criminal referral for all involved parties. Karen didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at her hands. Her sidekicks, one of them stood up and tried to leave before the judge had finished speaking. She ordered him back to his seat, and just like that, it was over. News of the verdict hit local media within the hour. The phrase, "abuse of power," was in every headline. HOA meetings across the county started seeing record attendance, mostly by residents demanding to see their own bylaws. I was interviewed twice, Once by a regional paper, once by a podcaster who loved stories of quiet rebellion. People who hadn't spoken to me in months were suddenly waving again. Some apologized. Some offered me dinner. I declined most of them. Nothing personal. I was just tired, real tired. Still, I couldn't help but smile when I got the court check. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance had finally been restored. The silence after the verdict was a different kind of quiet. Not tense, not suspicious, just empty. Like a room after an argument or a battlefield after the smoke clears. The war was over, but the damage was still visible in everything. The neighborhood's strained smiles, the empty lot where Karen's HOA HQ used to be, the hushed tone of gossip like folks were afraid I could hear them even through their walls. Karen was gone. Formally indicted 3 weeks after the civil ruling. She was hit with 8 felony counts and pled not guilty to every one, of course. But the DA's office had her dead to rights. The emails alone were enough to sink a career, and that was before they found evidence she'd used HOA funds to pay for private landscaping on her own property. She was denied bail after attempting to contact board members during pretrial. They called it witness tampering. I called it poetic. The other two, Brent, the guy with the golf polos, and Lila, the sunglasses queen, both flipped, testified against her in exchange for lighter sentences, community service, fines, no jail time. Honestly, I didn't care. They were side characters in a story they were too cowardly to walk away from. Let them rake leaves and repaint fire hydrants. As for the HOA, dissolved. The county forced a complete dissolution and financial audit. What they found wasn't embezzlement exactly. It was worse. Karen had quietly manipulated the budget for years, assigning vague line items like outreach materials or aesthetic compliance campaigns, and funneling them into her own pet projects. A stone patio here, a flagstone walking path there, a decorative fountain no one remembered approving. The assets of the HOA, including a small reserve fund and liability insurance, were liquidated. The homeowners got modest refunds from their dues, and what was left went to pay my settlement. $850,000. It didn't make me rich, not in a buy a yacht and disappear way, but it put me in a position of power I hadn't had in years. No debts, no worries about retirement, and more importantly, validation. You could tell which neighbors had rooted for me silently. They came by with pies, beers, baked lasagnas. One guy gave me a book titled "So You Just Destroyed a Corrupt HOA. What's Next?" Real book, believe it or not. I kept it on my shelf out of spite. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. A few of Karen's loyalists, mostly the ones who liked having someone else to do their thinking, muttered about overreactions and could have handled it better. One guy actually came up to me at the grocery store and said, "You know, all that, trouble for a barbecue spot?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "That barbecue spot was my yard." He didn't say another word. Daniel, my lawyer, told me we could pursue further damages if Karen tried to file a countersuit or defame me publicly, but she didn't. Her lawyer quit the minute her emails were submitted into court. Last I heard, she was trying to get a plea deal and blaming a hostile neighborhood environment for her behavior. Sure, Karen, the best part? The HOA database. The online portal they use to track violations, collect dues, and send passive-aggressive digital newsletters was taken offline by court order. For weeks, the site just read, "Silver Pines Ridge HO is no longer active. Please contact your attorney if you have concerns." No one missed it. With the old regime gone, the county sent reps to help transition the neighborhood to a no HOA model. A few folks wanted to start a new one, but this time, voluntary, transparent, limited. I didn't say much at those early meetings, just watched, let them talk. Then one day, someone asked if I'd consider chairing an interim neighborhood council. I laughed, out loud, but I didn't say no, not right away. Instead, I took a walk along the edge of my yard, the same damn edge where I'd moved the fence for visual harmony, where I'd watched Karen's clipboard army march toward me like they owned the air I breathed. That fence was still there, but it had new paint now, a new light, a new camera mounted just above it, blinking red like an ever-watchful eye. A reminder, they pushed. I pushed back harder, and now they were gone. But I was still here. It's been just over a year since Karen tried to turn my lawn into her HOA's private playground. The air feels different now, lighter, quieter, Like the neighborhood finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I still live in the same house, still sit on the same porch most mornings with my coffee, watching the sunlight cut through the trees like blades. But I'm not the same man. The fence, the one I'd moved to appease a clipboard and a fake smile, I tore that sucker down last fall and rebuilt it exactly where it was supposed to be, right on the legal property line. It's solid now. No more compromise. No more invisible surrender for the sake of visual symmetry. I even carved a small brass plaque into the gatepost. It reads, "Private land. Enter with respect or don't enter at all." The mailbox is back to its original shape. Ugly metal, dented from life, perfectly functional. And the paint? I let it weather over winter, then gave it 2 bold coats of forest green. Not HOA gray, not neutral beige. Real color, real choice. Freedom never looked so sharp. I did end up chairing that neighborhood council for a while, at least until the transition settled, not because I wanted power, because someone had to lay down the new rules without turning them into weapons. We drafted a simple charter, no mandatory dues, no cosmetic enforcement, no boundary overreach, just a few basic points: snow clearing coordination, emergency contact trees, and an annual chili cook-off, voluntary attendance, no clipboards. At the first meeting, I opened with this: "I'm not here to tell you how to live. I'm here to make sure nobody else does either." The room clapped, not because I was clever, but because they were ready. Ready for something different, something real. Funny thing about taking a stand, once you do it loud enough, people remember. A couple months ago, a small-town college invited me to speak to their civics class about property rights and HOA law. Me, a retired firefighter with no political aspirations and a scar across my left wrist from a barn fire in '17, I gave a talk titled, "The Line is Yours to Draw." They loved it. I'm not a hero. I didn't burn down the system. I just refused to let it tell me who I was. Karen thought I'd cave because I didn't fight back at first, because I was polite, because I moved a fence, but that wasn't weakness. That was grace. And grace, when pushed hard enough, grows teeth. These days, I still keep the cameras up. Not out of paranoia, but out of principle, a reminder that even good fences aren't enough if you're not willing to defend what's behind them. My neighbors? They wave now. The genuine kind. The ones that say, "I respect you," not "I'm watching you." Kids ride bikes again without Karen yelling about helmet colors. Halloween decorations are back in full chaos mode. One house even put up a 10-foot inflatable dragon last October. No one filed a complaint. We're not perfect, but we're free. I spend most mornings on the porch with my mutt Cinder. Adopted him last winter. He's got a bum leg and one floppy ear. Tough, stubborn, and loyal as hell. We suit each other. Sometimes I get letters from folks in other towns, people fighting their own versions of Karen. They tell me my story gave them the courage to stand up, that they printed the court case, that they cited me in community meetings. One guy sent a photo of his newly rebuilt fence with the same plaque I'd made. It made me laugh, because that's all it ever was: a line, drawn, and held. And now, above my gate, next to the new motion light, hangs one last plaque. It's simple. Black letters on steel. Be kind, but know where to draw the line. And I always will.